Okay. Good evening, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing well. It's a drizzly Saturday evening here in the Pacific Northwest with some crazy thunder this morning. I hope tomorrow finds us a little bit better. I am so excited to have Joanna Mummert on today. She's a financial advisor, my own personal friend and personal financial advisor. And I want to let you know ahead of time that I've talked to Joanna and just told her I'm very open with my community. And I am really transparent and just want you to know that I find value in her services so much that I'm willing to just talk about my finances in front of you and with you, because a huge stress relief for us was when we became more financially stable. And one of the ways we did that was with Joanna. And another way I feel really calm is being able to use her as a sounding board and ask her for advice and to calculate different decisions we make financially. And she's been there every step of the way for us. And so I'm so excited to have her on, and I can't wait for her to tell you a little bit of her background before we jump into our conversation.
Thank you, Kaylin. That's very sweet. I'm excited to be part of your recording tonight. Yeah, I was thinking about what to talk about this evening. I know we're going to have a conversation, but with all the thunder and lightning and everything that's been going on, it's like I just feel this. There is so much stress that comes around from the atmosphere and our environment. So hopefully this evening we can talk about ways of approaching finances that can take away some of that stress that we feel.
Money is a huge financial burden for so many families and marriages. Mm-hmm. I think it's, even when we're not in a pandemic, even when we're not in the current situation, it's such a huge stress for so many people. So I think even beyond current situations, I think it'll serve people for long term. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I did not go to school to study personal finances. I went to the University of San Francisco and studied communication, of all things, and really fell into my career out of college. So I started in a financial planning firm in the year 2000 and really found that I got pulled into it because of the difference that I could see that was being made in people's lives. And from day one, just realizing that every single person at whatever level they're at needs some sort of coaching and help when it comes to finances. And so now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's year 2020. How in the world have I been in the industry this long? It doesn't seem possible. But I've seen 3 huge market cycles, 2001, 2008, 2009, and then now, where there've been large swings in the stock market. And so many people are focused in the stock market. And not only that, but just the economy in general and experiencing the ups and downs. I feel kind of like by now I've seen pretty much all the different scenarios that are possible. And so that's really helped to just really nurture my love for what I do. And what can I say? I'm totally passionate about it. And having people like you and Kevin in my life makes it even more enjoyable. So I've been in the industry for a long time now, and I do all sorts of things when it comes to finances. But the biggest thing I like to say is I'm not your typical financial advisor. And people always ask me, well, what do you mean by that? And really what it comes down to is when you hear financial advisor, you tend to think somebody that fits in this little box, somebody who does mutual funds and IRAs and 401ks, but it's so much bigger than that. And that's really where I come in as a coach. And retirement planning counselor is actually my title, but it's so much more than just planning for retirement.
I'm going to tell them how we connected. So we were friends, business partners at the time, if you will, with another venture. And she had mentioned that that's just like her side gig, but she's really a financial advisor. And at the time, like Kevin and I were dipping into our kids' piggy banks to like pay for groceries, and we were a paycheck to paycheck family just trying to get by. We had just bought our first house by the skin of our chinny chin, and we really were just like staying afloat. And
Mm-hmm.
you came into our life at a perfect time, and you knew our situation, and you invited us to this conference and told us about this book, which I'll let you talk a little bit more about, which changed our perception about money and how to use money, and invited us to this class, and we were all in. Like, it just made so much sense to us that we had clearly been doing everything wrong. We really did need help and guidance, and it gave us hope that even with a small amount of money, we were able to
Yeah.
build, I wouldn't call it wealth, but we were able to build money that we could up our homes. Like, we've had 3 homes since we've known you, and we've build a lot more financial freedom to do things. We're still figuring things out. And we always call Joanna because we're like, should we do this or should we not do this? But that's how we got connected. So Joanna knows all about our finances and our path and our struggles from day one. And can you talk a little bit about this book and the class that you took that maybe is kind of like, what did
Yes,
you do in the class that we're like, yes, why aren't we doing this?
exactly. So it's so cool that you say that that book was like this turning point, because I will tell you that book, and where you learn the strategies and the philosophy around money that's produced there is what changed my life in terms of financial practice, because I had spent the first 10 years of my career focusing on the amount of money that people save instead of all this other cash that comes into play. This is the money that gets spent. This is the money that gets transferred away from your household. And so the book by Nelson Nash, and it's called Becoming Your Own Banker. And that's a whole conversation that can go on for hours. But that idea really sparked this new vision of how to view money. And so I'm super glad that you brought that up, because that's a big it's a big part of what I do in the education process, because I really believe that it all comes down to financial education. And as Nelson Nash would say, it's about the way you think. It's all about the way you think. I can say that over and over again, because we've been conditioned to think one way, and in reality, the wealthy are doing it a different way. And it's been in process for generations. It's just that the average person can make small changes to their cash flow in order to create, like what you said, you don't need a ton of money to become successful and to get things working in your favor.
We didn't have
And so,
start.
right. And so the concept and that idea that is really to bring it down to the everyday person's level, that you can take control of your finances with a small amount. But the important thing is you're doing something about it and you're getting started. And one of the things that before we started recording that I mentioned was there's this major stress of not having money. That's like a huge source of stress for people. And money is like a huge source of problems within a marriage. Arguments over money. It's a huge source of stress. And I started thinking about that, and I said to myself, well, it's not that you don't have money that's causing stress. That's not the cause of it. The cause is the fact that you don't know. It's the unknown and the lack of control. Because it would be fine if you didn't have very much money in your bank account right now if you knew that next week you were going to be getting a $5,000 paycheck, right? there wouldn't be that stress because you know what's coming. But it's the unknown and the lack of control that is really what's fueling those feelings of anxiety. And so that's, I think, something that if we can look back and see what areas can we regain control, or what areas can we protect ourselves, well, that's going to bring that sense of calm that we need, because cash flow and keeping your money in motion and being able to spend money isn't an issue if you know when you're going to have it and when you need to pay certain bills and to have it running like a well-oiled machine.
I remember
So
when
I think
talked to us or given us examples in the class about, I think it was like the tractors some guy had bought for his company, and that
yeah,
actually making money by borrowing money from himself by buying more things. And I was like, what? And I'm like, this
yes,
doesn't make any sense. And I had to like look at the math.
yeah.
Like Joanne, when we moved into our house about a year ago, we put in new fencing and new flooring because our house was a mess, and we accrued a credit card debt. And we actually took out a HELOC just recently to like get back on track, and called
Mm-hmm.
again. But I kind of lost my train of thought. But like my thoughts around this, like that spending that money or getting your money to work. We were doing our HELOC. You're like, well, don't get the one with the lower interest rate. You want the one that.
Right.
I'm like, wait, what? Why? That seems like. But then when you break it down and you have someone to show you the math of a long term, how much money you actually would have wasted by doing what the bank said was better for us,
Right.
was really an eye-opening experience. So having someone to calculate with me was so huge in the confidence to close that loan and know we were making the right decision for ourselves.
Yeah. And that's such a really good point, because that just goes back to that idea of we're conditioned to think a certain way. You know, we've been conditioned to think in terms of interest rates
Yeah.
and how much, what's the interest rate on this, what's the interest rate on that. But we're missing such important pieces of the overall picture. And to have someone walk you through, I think, like you said, can be really valuable. And one of the things that, without getting too deep, right, because we only have a short, amount of time this evening to talk about it, but if I can just talk a little bit about this idea of having access to money, because what you just said is key. When you have your house and you've got your value that's locked up in the home, right? Because your home has equity in it, got that value that's built into it for being an asset that it is. And you're making payments into it because you've borrowed money from the bank to buy it. Well, that house is going to increase in value or decrease in value based on market demand, right? And that home is going to have the value whether or not you've borrowed money against it or not. So the bank loan for that home is completely separate of the actual asset that a home can be, right? And so we're looking at that. I try to tie it back and say access to cash. Who's giving you access to the cash that you've stored in the house, right? And so the power of money, or the true power of money, really comes into whether or not it's liquid, you have unlimited use over it, and you have control. So liquidity, use, and control are those three pieces. Well, if you have to go to the bank to access the equity in your home, what do you have to do? You have to apply for a bank loan, right? You got to go to the bank and you have to apply. And you say, well, this is my house. I've been paying money into it. I'm making the payments. My neighbor's house sold for $50,000 more than it was supposed to. So the market's up. I want the money out of my house. I want to use it. I want to go do something with it. I have improvements to make. I want to go and put a down payment on a rental property. But what does the bank tell you when you go to apply for a loan? What are some of the things? So when you went to apply for your home equity line of credit, what were some of the things that they wanted to make sure you had in place?
They wanted to make sure that our credit was high, that we were paying on
Oh
bills.
yeah.
They wanted to make sure that we still were employed and had enough income. They wanted to make sure that our home value was high enough
Mhm.
to borrow
Right.
on.
Yes, exactly. The banks are the ones that are holding the control, aren't they? Because you got to have an income, you got to have a credit score that's high enough, you got to have the ability to pay it back. And they're the ones that are setting all the rules about the loan itself and how it functions. And one of the things that people don't realize is that banks can call loans. They can tell you that, okay, we need to call this loan and you need to pay us back the money you borrowed, right? Banks can stop, they can freeze lending. So they can stop letting people have access to cash. And this happened, I think, in 2008 and 2009. I was talking to some people who needed to get money, take out a line of credit, and I'm not sure if it was a home equity line of credit or just a business line of credit, but they are the ones that control when you can access the money. And so that's that's not control, because you're dependent on the bank.
Yeah.
Not only that, but there's fees attached, right? There's always some sort of fees and limitations. So being able to have full use of your money means that you can use it any way you want. And it goes back to that idea of control. But not only that, but full differentiation would be like what you and I were talking about before. How's the loan calculated? How is the interest being calculated? And I don't know if you remember this story, but I try to tell people, not always just you guys listen to me, but it's not about the rate, it's about the volume. So you think about going to the doctor's office, and this is straight out of the book. You go to the doctor's office and you need a shot of penicillin because you're sick. Well, if the doctor gives you too much penicillin, it can harm you. And if they give you too little, then it's not maybe going to work properly, right? That's volume, which is much more important than the rate at which it's given, right? So it puts it into perspective, I think, in a sense that, yes, we need to pay attention to volume, just like talking about taxes. Kaylin, taxes and interest and all these different things that we don't have control over, because we don't have control over the tax rates that are out there.
An example,
We don't,
instruct
right?
to pay. So Joanna, as soon as we started, we could talk about our policies in a minute and how we're using our policies, but Joanna has hooked Kevin and I up with policies. So we have our own banking policies. And when we first started our policies, we asked about taxes. And she basically said, stop paying anyone anything. Hold on to all of your money. You gain all the interest on all of your money. So I had nothing going towards taxes in my pay. Nothing was pulled from my check. I had it all separate. And then at the end of the year, I had my own money in my own little account, and then my policy, and then we paid from there. So then that entire year, instead of the government making money on my interest from my tax withdrawal, we were making interest on my tax withdrawal. So maybe you could talk a little bit about policies and how we get our policies to take control of some of those. Everyone has taxes coming out of their paycheck.
Right.
One way
Right.
who doesn't have a large amount of money to start a policy or something could in fact take some control of limited funds that they do have, maybe.
Right. So the first thing I have to say is my little disclosure, because we're recording this, is always talk to a professional so that you get good personalized advice. I'm not a tax accountant or an attorney, so nothing that you and I, Kaylin, are talking about constitutes as advice. I have to say that, or I wouldn't be, being responsible. But in your situation, right, since we're talking about you, a lot of times what I find, I like playing this game called Find the Money, because most families, most couples, most individuals are their monthly budget, or what they're spending on a monthly budget, or how they're diverting funds. Most often there is a way to change that monthly cash flow so that you're not spending more. It's the same cash flow, but you're just changing its course. So you're just putting it in a slightly different place where it's going to benefit you more than the way it had been. So what in your example is, if you're overpaying, or you're having all of your withholdings come out, you're having the maximum withholdings on your tax, on your paycheck. Well, the government's getting an interest-free loan from you, because they're getting money. You're sending it to them freely. Here, take it. Take my money. Well, there's something in giving that up, because what could you be doing with that money in the meantime? Granted, you still have to pay it. So we're not saying that you're not going to end up paying your taxes, right? You're going to pay. But the question is when. So there's a lot of these little tricks, which is why I say I love playing this Find the Money, because there's always a way to find little tweaks here and there to improve your cash flow situation. You said something that made me think of what?
I said, especially when you started with us, it was a lot of work to find the money.
Right.
Found the money.
Yeah. Yes. Some cases are more challenging than others. So it's a fun challenge, and especially when people are willing to participate. And you and Kevin have always been so open, and that's huge, because in order to learn and to really make those kind of changes, you have to be open and coachable, right? Otherwise, it's like I'm pulling teeth, and then that doesn't work, because I'm trying to help someone who's just not taking my advice, and then it's not going to work. But you said something in what you're talking about, and I lost what I was saying, or what I was thinking.
That it was challenging to find the money, or the taxes, or I don't know.
Well, okay, what was it? Oh my gosh. It'll come back to me. I was talking, I think it had to do with the control and rate versus volume. So much of what I do is really specialized for each situation, right? And I think too, well, we could talk about so many different topics, because there's so much in this whole broader picture. But I know when a household is looking at their annual pattern of spending, I think that's what we're kind of talking a little bit about. Most families, they've got debt. A lot of people have debt. The majority of people have some sort of debt, whether it's student loan, car loans, maybe you've got some fun toys like a boat, or you've got
We're both smiling because we sold the boat. It helped us figure out how to buy a boat, and then we sold the boat, and she was like, I knew the boat was a bad idea. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we're being honest, transparent. So there's most people have debt, but there's good debt, and there's bad debt, and there's really bad debt. And so when we're talking about different types of interest, well, the interest rate is going to be less important than the volume of interest, because you got to look at the volume that you're paying towards your debt. And so kind of taking a step back, the annual pattern of spending of a family or a household, I don't know if you know this, Kaylin, but about a third of it goes towards interest payments, a third goes towards living expenses, and about a third goes towards taxes. So I find this interesting because a lot of people have asked me this, well, I'm not paying 33% in taxes. You know, our income tax is much lower and we've got deductions and everything. And I'll say, but there's a lot of hidden taxes that we don't think about. And so another book, I have a long reading list for anybody who's interested, but I'm just like flashing it really quick because I've got my notes here. But there's so many other taxes that we pay. Property taxes, there's a school tax, there's long-term capital gains, short-term capital gains tax, sales tax, estate, gasoline tax. I just paid for my registration, my car registration. There's a huge tax on that. Cell phones, airport tax, telephone license plates, hotels, luxury. The list goes on and on. There's like this huge list of all these extra taxes that we pay. Now, I'm not saying that taxes are bad, because taxes are necessary to pay for a lot of public funding and projects and education, right? So I'm not saying that taxes are bad, but again, it comes down to controlling over when you're going to pay those. So one of the things that I like to really analyze when I'm talking to people is, are you putting a ton of money away into your retirement plan at work because you want the tax deduction? Because a lot of people will say, oh, I want to get my taxes lower, I need to get a tax deduction. And so it's, look at it this way. You're not avoiding paying the tax, really, if you're putting money into something like that. So you have to, it's just about seeing the picture the way it really is, and understanding that you're deferring the tax. So with a tax qualified plan, you know, you're putting money into something and avoiding having to pay the taxes now, right? Because you're not having to deal with it now, but you're basically putting it off to pay later, because taxes are eventually going to be due, and the government is going to make sure they get their tax one way or another. So just understanding those little tricks in terms of what's the best way to attack funding and saving, just knowing some of those things makes a huge difference. And I was going to draw something. Can I draw a little bit? Yeah. Okay. Just a little bit. I just had a couple things I wanted to share. If I can do, let's see. Okay. So this, oops.
Okay, you should be able to do it.
Okay. So I like this because I am a very visual person, and a lot of times I find that this is helpful. So Kaylin, tell me if I'm wrong, but when I met you and Kevin, we'll just say here's the 0 line, okay? That's a 0. And we'll use you as an example. But let's say you, at that point in time, let's just say you need to buy a new car, because I can't remember when I first met you if you were just buying your home or what was going on. But let's say you needed a new car. Well, what happens if you have 0 in savings? What do?
Yeah.
You either go into debt to purchase the car and then slowly pay it off, or you save money and then you pay cash, right? Same thing. And this is a cycle that goes over and over again, because once you get back to 0 and you want to pay for the next thing, you've got to save money. Oops, come on, why isn't this drawing? Save money, and then you spend cash, and it goes to 0. So whoop, save and then pay, save and then pay. And I don't know what's not drawing, right? It's starting to look funny, but you get the idea. And then again, on the bottom, like I was saying, you either go into debt, pay it off, go into debt, pay it off, go into debt, pay it off over and over again. Well, what's the lesson here? Because you always end up back at zero. And some people find that they can't even stay at zero because they're not able to ever really truly pay off their debts. So it can be really scary for people if they don't know a way out. And a lot of people find themselves in this situation even if they're making good money. You know, maybe the couple's making $150,000 a year and they're still in this situation because they don't know what they're supposed to be focusing on, right? And so what I try to do, and we call this, this is the debtor down here. This is the person that's always using debt. This is the saver who says, hey, I don't ever have to take out a bank loan, so I'm not paying interest anywhere. But they're not ever really earning because they always still end up at zero, right? And then this line is where we try to take people, whoops, which is the wealth creator line. And that's the line that allows you to still pay for what you need in life, in the here and now, in the current days, but still grow and have money in the long term. That's the mission behind what I focus on when I'm looking at people's overall portfolios.
And I want
And
we talked a lot about homes, and like you're helping my brother-in-law and he doesn't own a home, right? And
right.
so I'm trying to think, like, if someone were to want to start growing wealth, what's
Mm-hmm.
the first step, or how much would they need to, like, they would have to get you to find the money, right? And then
Right. Yes.
what would be steps to get out of debtor or saver patterns, wealth building patterns?
So I think the first thing that I usually like to do is it's always important to analyze where someone's at currently, right? And what's the current cash flow? What's their current budget? Because if someone is spending too much and they're spending more than, if they're being unrealistic in their spending patterns, then they've got to have an honest conversation about that to see if it's completely unrealistic or I've met and counseled a lot of people who have issues with spending, and then they start kind of realizing that maybe they need to pull back a little bit in certain areas and pay themselves first. And so a lot of times it really depends on the people that I'm sitting with and say, are you serious about making a change? But most of the time, a change like that isn't really even necessary in the sense of, well, cut down your monthly expenses. It's more just looking at, are you spending, are you putting a ton of money into your 401k plan? Are you, putting money away into something that you have access to and control over? And playing that game, as we said, and just really analyzing the big picture, because a lot of times, what?
You have extra funds, and you helped us read money.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, just when I'm looking at someone's big picture, we'll look at, if you've got debt, where are the different debts? What credit cards are you using? Where is the cheaper money? So taking a look and see, okay, well, this one's got the lowest interest rate, right? If we're talking apples to apples in terms of credit cards. And we analyze and I see, okay, this one you're paying 15%, this one you're paying 5%. how much is the monthly payment on this one? If we can chunk this out of the way, how much cash flow is that going to free up?
That snowball.
So what was that?
Kind of like that snowballing.
Yes. And looking at your whole big picture. And so that's one place that started. That, and I'll often look and see how much people are putting into their work. If you're putting in more than that, and we'd have a conversation about that. And there's other places. There's a lot of different things that I can find when I sit down and look at it. But I think the main thing is there's hope for people out there.
I could also see
Because
the sheer benefits of like getting your partner on the same page financially and goals, and how that could reduce stress.
mhm, yeah. Mhm,
Like having
totally.
people say, "Oh my gosh, look at your spending, you guys." Let's like having
Yeah,
we call it a come to Jesus talk in our house, but like a come to Jesus talk.
that's right. Yeah.
And then having someone outside of, for in our case, like Kevin and I, when we were really struggling, like we would have occasional maybe not arguments, but more like stress. Like we were really stressed and trying to figure out what we were going to do, where money was going to come from. And having you come in and not be judgmental, sit down with us and make a plan, gave us some ease. But then we were also working together then on this common like mission, if you will, or goal, move forward. And it united us in a way that I didn't really anticipate, because I didn't realize that we were having like we weren't having marital problems, but we didn't realize how much stress it was causing us, I guess I would say.
Right. But that's so great to have that kind of an outcome over, because people talking about finances and it's something that they kind of want to hide, like they want to hide their from their spouse, I think. But you're right, having an honest and open conversation about it really can unite the two of you. So there's this one piece of it, and where do you want me to go from here? Because there's so many different ways we could continue the conversation. I think the main thing is that having the ability to kind of help point out what can be done in order to pay off your debt. I think the trick that I was kind of getting at is that you want to still, even though you're doing that process and you're financing things to live, there is a way to take out or to limit or to decrease the involvement of commercial banks in your everyday life, right? And I think that's the main thing. I think that's kind of what you were alluding to when you mentioned your policies. So there's so many different investment vehicles out there, and certain assets are assets that are well, there's different investment vehicles and there's different pieces that go into those vehicles, right? And most everyone knows about and hears about the stock market, mutual funds, and bonds. Well, there's a lot of risk still associated with that. And I like to kind of divide into two piles of money: savings and investments. And your savings, most people don't even have money in savings, but they're already over in the side. And they've got money in investments. The problem is investments should be the money that you can afford to lose. Because if you're going to play around with investments, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you got to make sure you've got a firm financial foundation with the savings part first.
So
Because look what just happened in the market, in the stock market. A lot of money was lost, and you got to wait for it to come back. So if you've got something that's stable and in that savings bucket, that's the money that you can't afford to lose. So you've got to make sure that you've got an asset that's continuing to grow, that has liquidity use, and that you can control in that bucket, so that when the stock market has gone down and you've experienced some sort of loss over here, this foundation on this side is not suffering the same losses. And that's where what you started to talk about with policies. And I'll give a little tiny plug without going too deep into the mechanics, because we would talk for hours. But I have a nice little list of a description of the perfect investment. Again, the disclosure, right? Disclaimer is that life insurance is not an investment, okay? It's still life insurance. However, what life insurance can do is act like, it becomes an asset. It is an asset if it's the type that we're talking about, because there is a value to it. So there's a guaranteed value that goes up in value. It increases over time. There's all sorts of benefits when it comes to taxes. It guarantees there's no market losses, tax deferred growth, there's protection. I mean, talk about the perfect investment, all these checks versus what the alternatives are. So permanent insurance is an asset, holds a value. And it just so happens that that asset has characteristics that are perfect for creating a way to access accumulating cash. And I think that's what you were starting to say has been a huge benefit for your family.
Yeah, so just to be clear to people watching, like we've taken the you're talking,
Right.
Kevin and I own life insurance policies that we use like a bank account, but is also there to protect us should something happen to one or the other or both of us for our children. So I just want to be clear that for other people, that is what we're talking about, which we came to find through you, and it's worked wonders for us on multiple occasions. We've used it when we were in trouble. We've used it to put down payments on homes. We've used it to do remodeling. It's helped us so many times, and then we just pay ourselves back instead of paying a bank back.
Right. And two, when we're talking about using life insurance as a cash accumulation vehicle, and using it as a bank, I want to just make sure, like we're saying, that the viewers understand. Don't do it alone, in the sense of there's way more to it. We are just like talking about the very general characteristics and how it's helped in Kaylin's case. But really, there's a lot of strategy that goes into the design and use and management of a family banking system that is a whole different conversation. But I think looking at it from the standpoint of, if you don't look at all the different pieces to your portfolio and to your finances, you're missing out on a really valuable tool even out of your equation. And I think that's a really important lesson to bring up, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not a typical financial. And the reason for that is because I'm a holistic financial coach, that we're looking at your entire situation. Kaylin and I are on the phone, we're texting, we're messaging each other all hours of the day, because I love what I do. And I want to be there, and I want to be accessible for people that have questions in that moment. I try to do the best I can to be able to help people, on those kind of purchases or closing on a new home purchase, at the last, at whatever moment. I want to make myself available. And so looking at that approach, I think it's very different from just somebody who's managing mutual fund accounts and counseling with a very narrow perspective. Because I've been there, I've done that. I spent a lot of time doing modern portfolio theory and making sure that we had well-balanced financial portfolios. But what we were leaving out was this main piece of it, which was the life insurance and what that can bring to the big picture, which is so much more than what we're even just talking about in this moment. But like you said,
How many years have we had our policies? 5, 6?
I think, let's see, yeah, 5. I think you're in year 6.
I'm going to say that we took a class, Kevin and I. We've read the book, Kevin and I. We've counseled with you multiple times. And it's like just now kind of starting to make sense. And I cannot imagine trying to tackle this terrain on my own with any success at all. So I just want to encourage people to take you up on your support and your help. Like, she'll come over to your home, she'll Zoom over, like, you have been so available, and I just can't thank you enough for all that you've done for us.
Oh, and it's been a huge pleasure. And like I try to tell people, it's nothing. This is not a transaction, right? We're not just making a transaction in setting up a plan for you, right? I tell people, I want to be here through the long haul. I want to counsel you through this. And we're talking about stress, right? Let me take that burden of stress away from you, right? So that when you have questions about, wait a second, what credit card should I be focused on paying off? I got a nice bonus. What should I do with it? Let me be the sounding board to help you make an appropriate decision for your family, and to review yearly at the very least where you're at. I think just having a resource and having that relationship, which is what I focus on, that's what I want to bring to the table. So it's not like you're going to flip a switch. It's not that fast. Like I said, it's been 5 years, going on 6, but I don't expect the people that I'm working with to to be experts in any of this, because that's my job, right? I just need to have people like you who trust me, trust my knowledge, and know that I want what's best for you and your family, which is why I think it works so well, because the two of you have been so good to work with and come to me with questions, and if you don't get something, it's okay. We're talking long term. It's not just flipping the switch.
Well, Joanna, I don't know if you have any last tips, or if you want to share your contact information.
Yes. I had, well, let me see if I can still do that. Oh, no, that's okay. So I would say that it's always great to email me. So I'll give my email address. And then also, should I give my phone number? What do you normally like to do for that?
I think if I put the chat up, that's part of the recording, right?
I don't know.
Well, maybe you could type it in the chat, and then we'll
Okay.
words. And if not, I will read it out loud, and then I'll link it in the description when I post the comments.
Okay, the chat is disabled, so
I'm gonna try to fix it. Let's see. Participants can chat. If I could pull this bar up, it would really be great. How do I, oh guys, this is, okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, you should be able to chat.
ta-da!
Angela,
Okay.
you
Yes,
you have any questions for Joanna before we go?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, I'm gonna copy this, Joanna, and
Is
I'll.
that the best way, Kaylin? Or should my phone number on there too? It's also my personal phone number. So that's why I always wonder if before I publish it, if I should just leave it at email or
I think they could
I'm
email
on
us
Facebook.
your phone number if
Yeah,
they're.
I'm on Facebook too.
If you could post that one in my personal community versus the one that's going on YouTube.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
I
Well,
haven't had any crazy messages yet, so it's okay.
so much. I think that just as a reminder, people don't need extra funds. People don't.
Right. Yeah. If you think like if you're hesitating to reach out because you think, oh, I don't know, I'm beyond help or I don't have enough cash to do it. I don't charge for an initial consultation because I like to make sure that we have a mutual understanding that I can even help before I would charge you money, right? And so in fact, this didn't come up, but most often, the majority of times, I don't even necessarily charge my clients out of pocket. So if there's a hesitation because it feels like, cash flow is too tight, you've got too much debt, or you don't even know where to start, we can talk, and it's not going to have any obligation to you. So I just like to be able to at least
People who need you the
be a
most.
sounding board and we can chat about it. So yeah.
Thank you, Joanna. I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh.
We appreciate.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having this chat. And you look like an angelic creature right now because the sun is just shining on you.
The lamp up here in my desk.
Oh, it's not even the sun. I was like, where's the sun? I don't have any sunshine.
I was wondering too.
Oh, well, thank you.
Everybody.
I really hope that this was not, this, I know we didn't get into anything too detailed, but it was really just to give an overview and to let people know that there are tools out there. Anybody has the power and the ability to turn their financial situation around. And in lots of cases, it's not even going to require drastic change.
Thank you. All right. We can do this.
Yes. Okay.